Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Holly Pritchard, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Group Captain Philip Trigg. We welcome the veterans who have served, those who are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of Mount Sampson State School, Mount Sampson, Queensland, Mount Sylvia State School, Mama Creek State School, and Mount White Stone State School from the Lockyer Valley in Queensland. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him in Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Trooper George Finley Donnison. George was born in Waverley, New South Wales in May 1899 to Robert and Sarah Donnison, and lived in Sydney for his childhood and teenage years. He attended the Christian Brothers Catholic School in Sydney and was a skilled horseman. George Donnison enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 19th of August 1915. Although he listed his age as 18 and his occupation as a drover, Donnison was in fact only 16 and still attending school. He was assigned to the 1st Light Horse Regiment with the rank of trooper. After training in camp outside Sydney, Trooper George Donnison left Australia on the 4th of October 1915 on HMAT Mashubra, bound for Egypt. Donnison joined the 2nd Light Horse at Heliopolis in late December. The regiment had just returned from serving dismounted on the Gallipoli Peninsula. On the 26th of December, Donnison was absent from early morning roll call and church and was charged with irregular conduct. He was sentenced to 7 days detention at Heliopolis. This was Donnison's only brush with military authorities during his service. While the rest of the 2nd Light Horse prepared for deployment to protect the Nile Valley from groups of pro-Turkish Sunnisi, Donnison was admitted to hospital in Abbasia in January 1916, suffering from mumps. On the 8th of February, he returned to his regiment, which was now stationed at Warden on the banks of the Nile. His regiment remained in the region until mid-May, when they joined the forces defending the Suez Canal from Ottoman attack. In July 1916, Donnison was transferred to the 1st Light Horse Training Regiment in Moascar, and then to the 6th Light Horse Regiment in October. There, Donnison was reunited with his 21-year-old brother, Herbert, who had been serving with the unit since November 1915. By March 1917, the British advance into Palestine had stalled outside the Ottoman-held city of Gaza. The 6th Light Horse was involved in early, failed attempts to capture the city in March and April 1917. The regiment stayed in the region after April 1917, preparing for an attack on Beersheba, on the eastern end of the Turkish defensive line. The regiment returned to Al-Khazar in late September to prepare the Allied force offensive at Beersheba. Following the success at Beersheba and the fall of Gaza on the 7th of November 1917, the 6th Light Horse joined the pursuit of the retreating Ottoman forces and the capture of Jerusalem in December 1917. The regiment then spent 2 weeks at a rest camp before joining British forces in the Jordan Valley for the failed raid on Amman. At the end of March, the regiment were back outside Amman with A and B squadrons making a dismounted attack on Turkish positions outside the city. Leaving their horses behind, Donnison and the other men advanced over open country and were subjected to heavy machine gun fire. They were ultimately forced to surrender with high casualties. In the confusion of the advance and the subsequent capture, Donnison was shot in the stomach by a machine gun, possibly from friendly fire, as he attempted to return to the Australian position and escape the Turks. 12 men from the regiment were captured, 10 of them wounded. They were taken to a train at the Amman station and left there with minimal medical care and food. On the morning of the 29th of March 1918, Trooper George Donnison died from his wounds. still on the train outside the Amman station. He was 18 years old. Donnison was buried in an unmarked grave by his captors beside the railway tracks near the Amman station, along with 2 other members of the 6th Light Horse. His comrades were not permitted to leave the train, and no one saw the exact location of the graves. Back home in Australia, several family members sent poems to local newspapers in memory of George. In November 1918, Herbert, who was still overseas waiting to be repatriated, submitted a poem in memory of his younger brother. It read, "In childhood we wandered together. In boyhood we answered the call. But you have died an Australian soldier, the greatest death of all." Despite attempts to locate the gravesite after the end of the war, George Donnison's remains were never recovered. He is commemorated at the Basra Memorial in Iraq, alongside the other Australian prisoners of war with no known grave, who died in the Middle East. His name is also listed on the honour roll on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his name listed on the Basra Memorial is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Trooper George Finley Donnison, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the light.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff, and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.